Chapter 1. Where's Raul? Frank Bullfish, known behind his back as Bullshit, sat at his office desk, an old restaurant table with a scorched mark from Armando's Hellfire sauce. The table came with the room above Armando's Mexican restaurant, the only place in Detroit where the owner accepted rent in bourbon and promises to find his wife's missing cat. From below came the sounds of mariachi furiously mangling. La cucaracha! Cooks shouting, and dishes shattering. Just another Tuesday in this mad place. Frank called both home and office. He leaned back on his creaky chair, the last reminder of his badge-carrying days. The chair once stood in the precinct until Frank confiscated it in 1977 as compensation for what he called an illegal and utterly unfair dismissal. A cracked glass held bourbon, sharp, cheap, and as hopeless as trying to justify yesterday's decisions. On the wall hung an old map of Detroit, pinned with markers, each telling its own story. Red, crime scenes where he once searched for clues and now might find trouble. Blue, bars serving tolerable whiskey and not asking too many questions. Green, last islands of hope, establishments where he hadn't yet been banned for unpaid tabs. Frank sighed, swirled his glass, and took a sip. Damn, life had certainly turned out well. In the corner, the keys to his faithful companion, a black '64 Ford Falcon, glinted dimly. The car, like its owner, was battered by life but still turned heads, especially when Frank sped through the city, scattering pigeons and local drug dealers. His musings were interrupted by a knock at the door, or rather, what was left of it after the local gang tried to collect a debt, and took the door with them. "Come in," he shouted. "Unless you're from the IRS, the police, or Los Lobos." A woman entered, and Frank's mouth went dry, not from the hot sauce. Her red dress was as fiery as the jalapenos in Armando's signature burrito, and her lips were painted so brightly they could serve as brake lights. "Are you Detective Bullfish?" she asked, a hint of doubt in her voice, scanning the room as if expecting Philip Marlowe's office. "Depends on who's asking," Frank replied, raising his glass. "If you're from the insurance company, I'm Jesus, the dishwasher. If you're looking for a detective, welcome to my humble office. Just don't sit on that chair by the window. It's held together by sheer will and my prayers." The woman gracefully sat on the only decent chair in the room. "My name is Monica Velasquez," she began, her voice so sultry it could make the tequila downstairs ferment again. "I have a problem, Mr. Bullfish. A delicate problem." Frank set his glass down, trying not to show that the room was slightly spinning. Last night's poker with Polish gangsters was still making its presence felt. "Problems are my specialty, Miss Velasquez. Especially delicate ones. And especially when they come in such dresses." Monica pulled a photograph from her purse and placed it on the table. The picture featured a middle-aged man with a smug grin and a gold chain as thick as an anchor rope. "This is my brother, Raul. He disappeared 2 days ago. Last seen in the East Side, supposedly meeting some business partners." Frank picked up the photo. It smelled of expensive perfume, a sharp contrast to the rancid oil wafting from the kitchen below. "Business partners in the East Side?" Frank chuckled. "Let me guess. They don't wear Brooks Brothers suits or sip martinis with olives. Mr. Bullfish." She leaned forward, and Frank felt his heart do a somersault worthy of an Olympic gymnast. "Raul doesn't always choose the right company. In Detroit, no one chooses the right company, Miss Velasquez. Even priests carry brass knuckles under their cassocks." She opened her purse and pulled out an envelope so thick it could pass for an airbag. "This is an advance," she said. "Find him, Mr. Bullfish, and try not to get into trouble." Frank took the envelope and peeked inside. There were enough 20s to cover all his debts. Well, maybe half. A quarter. at least enough for a new door. Where exactly in the East Side was he last seen? At a bar called El Coyote. She grimaced at the name as if it were something indecent. Do you know it? Do I know El Coyote? Frank smirked. Sweetheart, I've spent so much time there, they almost put me on the menu as a signature dish. Monica stood, adjusted her dress, and headed to the door. At the threshold, she turned. Be careful, Mr. Bullfish. And try not to drink on the job. Don't worry, Frank replied, raising his glass. This isn't drinking, it's disinfection. In this neighborhood, it's essential. Once the door closed behind her, Frank approached the map and pinned a red marker where El Coyote was located. The pin joined a dozen others, forming a pattern that could be mistaken for the constellation of Big Trouble. He grabbed his battered trench coat, which had seen so many fights it could write its own memoirs, slipped a flask of whiskey into his pocket, for disinfection, of course, and his revolver for everything else. Hey, Armando, he shouted, descending the stairs. If anyone's looking for me, tell them I went to save the world. Or to the bar. Whichever sounds more plausible. See, Senor Bullshit, came the reply from the kitchen. As usual then. Frank stepped outside, where his faithful Ford Falcon awaited, gleaming under the neon lights like an old but still dangerous predator. It was time to visit El Coyote and find out what trouble another businessman with a gold chain had gotten into this time. Deep down, he knew this case wouldn't be as simple as it seemed. After all, in Detroit, even ordering pizza could end in a shootout and a chase. And that's on a good day. El Coyote looked like it had been built from the rubble of every destroyed bar in Detroit, then decorated with graffiti too obscene even for prison walls. The neon sign blinked like a traffic light having a seizure, occasionally catching silhouettes of regulars standing guard at the entrance, like an honor guard at the mausoleum of alcoholism. Frank parked his Falcon between an ancient Cadillac that probably remembered Prohibition and a motorcycle decorated with enough skulls to outfit a small cemetery. From inside the bar came the sounds of music that resembled a cat wedding accompanied by machine gun fire. Home sweet home, Frank muttered, checking his revolver. In a place like this, even ordering a beer could turn into an international incident. Inside, the bar looked exactly like a place where dreams went to die. The smoke was so thick it could be sliced with a knife and served as the house special. Behind the counter stood a bartender, a true monument to human evolution, assuming it had taken a detour toward gorillas. His mustache was so enormous that a small criminal gang could hide in it. Bullshit, the bartender growled as Frank approached the bar. I thought they shipped you off to Guantanamo after that thing with the 3 strippers and the goat. Nice to see you too, Jorge. Still as charming as ever. And for the record, it was a llama, not a goat. And there were 4 of them. Jorge spat into the glass he was wiping, probably making it cleaner in the process. What do you want? Frank placed Raul's photo on the counter, first checking to make sure it wouldn't stick. This handsome fella. Word is he was hanging around here a couple of days ago. The bartender glanced at the photo, and his mustache twitched like a seismograph during an earthquake. Maybe I saw him. Maybe I didn't. But a little cash always helps jog the memory. Frank sighed and pulled out a 20. Jorge devoured it with his eyes faster than a snake swallowing a mouse. Over there. He nodded toward the far corner. His buddies. But be careful, Bullshit. They're not the kind who like to share stories over a pint. In the corner sat 3 men, who looked like they'd been assembled from spare parts of B-movie villains. The leader, judging by the gold chain the size of a ship anchor, was clearly the business partner Monica had mentioned. Thanks, Jorge. Frank picked up his whiskey. If you hear gunshots, call the cops. If you hear screaming, pour another. He headed to the table, feeling the air thicken with tension. Behind him, someone started taking bets on how many teeth he'd have left after the conversation. "Good evening, gentlemen," Frank said as he approached the table. "Mind if I join you? I promise not to ruin your high society soiree with my peasant presence." The leader looked up with as much warmth as a starving shark. "Who the hell are you, smartass?" "Frank Bullfish, private detective." "But friends call me Bullshit. Enemies too. Pretty much everyone, actually. I think it's officially my name now." One of the thugs reached for his gun, but Frank raised a hand. Hey, easy now. Let's skip the drama. I just want to talk about your buddy Raul. You really want me to call my old pal in homicide? He's a total asshole, but thorough as hell." The leader smirked, flashing a gold tooth that seemed to wink in the bar's dim light. "Bullshit, huh? I've heard of you. You're the cop who got canned for banging a mobster's wife." "Well, technically, she wasn't his wife yet. And honestly, it was love at first interrogation." Frank shrugged. "But this isn't about me. Where's Raul? And what makes you think we know? Let's think it through." Frank sipped his whiskey. "You're sitting in the seediest bar in Detroit, dressed like extras in a Godfather parody, and you've got faces like you just buried a body. Either you know where Raul is, or you're the worst actor since silent film." At that moment, the bar's front door burst open, and in walked Detective Mike Bulldog Ramirez, a man whose face looked like it had been sculpted in the dark and never smoothed out. Frank's former partner, and now archenemy number 3, after hangovers and unpaid bills. "Oh, great," Frank muttered. "This day just keeps getting better." "Bullshit," Ramirez barked. "What the hell are you doing here?" "Conducting a sociological study on the influence of tequila on life-altering decisions. Want to participate?" Ramirez approached the table, his badge glinting in the gloom like a beacon of incoming trouble. "I'm looking for these guys." He nodded at the trio. "And if you're here, something stinks." "Mike, buddy." Frank stood up, positioning himself between the cop and the thugs. "Remember that time at the Pink Flamingo? When you lost your pants in poker and I had to—" "Shut up, Bullshit," Ramirez snapped. "This is an official investigation." "Oh, really?" Frank feigned shock. "What are you investigating? The mysterious disappearance of all decent bars in Detroit?" Suddenly, the gang leader flipped the table. Bottles and glasses shattered everywhere, providing perfect cover for what came next. One of the thugs drew a gun, but Frank was faster. He grabbed a chair and hurled it at the attacker while shoving Ramirez aside. A bullet tore through the air where they'd just been standing. "What the hell, Bullshit?" Ramirez yelled, ducking behind the overturned table. "Welcome to my sociology survey," Frank shouted, rolling behind the bar. "Today's topic: how fast can a normal night at the bar turn into a shootout?" Jorge calmly pulled out a shotgun the size of a small anti-tank cannon from under the counter. "Not my bar, pendejo," he growled. "I just glued that counter back together yesterday." The thugs spread out across the bar, using tables and terrified patrons as cover. The leader slipped out the back door, leaving his goons to deal with the mess. "Ramirez!" Frank yelled. "Remember that move we practiced back at the academy? The one that cost me 2 ribs and a month in the hospital?" "Exactly. On 3? Goddamn it, Bullshit." 1. Frank drew his revolver. 2. Ramirez cocked his gun. 3. Frank vaulted out from behind the bar like a champagne cork, sprinting along the wall, firing his revolver and scattering patrons who hadn't yet ducked under tables. "Hey, jackasses," he shouted. "Remember that old joke about the cop and the PI who walk into a bar?" Meanwhile, Ramirez rolled behind the jukebox, which had just started playing Sweet Home Alabama. "Seriously, Bullshit? You're telling jokes in the middle of a shootout?" "What?" Perfect timing. Frank leapt over a table, dodging bullets. So, the cop and the PI walk into a bar. Shut up and do the move! Ramirez roared, firing at the chandelier, which crashed down onto one of the goons. And the bartender says, "We don't serve people on duty." Frank reached the opposite wall and pushed off. And the cop replies. Ramirez, cursing in 2 languages, rolled out from behind the jukebox and sprinted toward Frank. They met in the middle of the bar like a slapstick version of a WWE showdown. "We're OFF duty!" they shouted in unison. Frank grabbed Ramirez's arm. Ramirez spun around and boosted his old partner into the air like a drunk Superman. While airborne, Frank managed to A. Take a swig from his flask, B. Wink at a waitress, and C. Kick one thug in the face. Ramirez, using the momentum, flung Frank into the group of gangsters like a human bowling ball. The thugs fell like pins in a strike. "This is why I love working with professionals," Frank shouted, getting to his feet and brushing himself off. "Though it looked a bit different back at the academy." "You didn't weigh this much back at the academy, idiot," Ramirez groaned, rubbing his back. "My chiropractor's gonna hate you." Jorge, who had been calmly polishing glasses the entire time, shook his head. "You gringos always make everything complicated," he said, raising his massive shotgun and firing it into the ceiling. The blast was so loud it sounded like martial law had been declared in Detroit. Everyone froze. Even the jukebox choked mid-chorus. "Now," Jorge said calmly, "anyone who doesn't want to become part of the new interior design drops their weapons." Slowly, the gangsters, staring at the shotgun roughly the size of a small cannon, decided not to argue. "Gracias," Jorge nodded. "Should I send the damage bill to your usual address, bullshit?" "Put it on my tab," Frank sighed. "Right next to the one from last year's brawl with the Russian mob." "And the llama incident," Jorge added. "And the llama," Frank agreed. Ramirez pulled out his handcuffs. "All right, can someone explain what the hell just happened here? And where the hell is their boss?" "Oh, crap," Frank smacked his forehead. "While we were putting on our acrobatic show, that bastard slipped out the back door." "Great job, detective," Ramirez said with biting sarcasm. "Want to tell another joke while the trail goes completely cold?" "Actually," Frank smirked, "I know where he went. And if you don't arrest me in the next 5 minutes, I might even tell you." Ramirez rolled his eyes. "God, why me?" "Fine, spill it. But if you're lying, I swear I'll shove your PI license where the sun don't shine." "Mike, buddy," Frank patted him on the shoulder. "Have I ever let you down? You want me to bring up the Russian mob thing? Or the llama? Those were creative misunderstandings." Jorge pulled out a battered notebook from under the counter, one that looked like it had survived every war of the 20th century. He began writing, glancing occasionally at the wrecked bar. "Let's see. 3 broken tables, $4.50. Hey, those tables were already in terrible shape," Frank protested. "Now they're in really terrible shape. Chandelier, $200. Oh, come on. It didn't even work." "Exactly. It was an antique non-working chandelier." "Broken bottles, $8.40. "What?" Ramirez choked. "That was cheap whiskey." "See, but now it's collectible broken cheap whiskey." "Emotional damage to the mariachi band, $300. "What mariachi band?" Frank looked around. "There were no musicians here. They were scheduled to perform tonight. Now they have psychological trauma and are demanding compensation." As Jorge continued his calculations, Ramirez turned to Frank. "You know, this reminds me of that time at the Blue Flamingo. Remember?" "Oh no, not this again," Frank groaned. "Oh yes," Ramirez grinned. "When you thought you could speak Chinese." I learned a few phrases from a phrase book. You tried to negotiate with the triad and accidentally proposed to their boss. How was I supposed to know that let's settle this peacefully sounds like I want to spend the rest of my life with you? One of the cuffed gangsters raised a hand. Sorry, but can we hear the llama story? No. Frank and Ramirez shouted in unison. The llama story is classified on a federal level, Frank added. Besides, we've got to find Raul. Ah, yes. Raul, Ramirez said, turning serious. What do you know about him? Well, his sister hired me to find him. Said he disappeared after meeting with some business partners. Sister? Ramirez whistled. The bombshell in the red dress? You know her? Let's just say, it reminds me of another story. Remember the fake fortune teller case? Frank groaned. Don't say it. Exactly. Our Miss Velasquez is a known con artist. 3 arrests, 2 convictions. And Raul is her favorite sob story for scamming gullible detectives. Shit! Frank slammed his fist on the counter, sending splinters flying. Adding damage to the bar to your tab, Jorge noted calmly. So where's our boss headed now? Ramirez asked. Frank gave a sly smile. Ah, that's the fun part. Remember that warehouse on the docks where we busted the smugglers? The one where you accidentally set a crate of fireworks on fire. Technically, it was a tactical diversion. Half the port thought World War III had started. Anyway, Frank pulled a matchbox from his pocket with an address scribbled on it. Our pal went there. And that brings the total, Jorge said, tearing himself from his notes, to $2,845.67, plus emotional damages, for me, for having to listen to all this. Frank and Ramirez exchanged a look. Jorge, buddy, Frank started. Any chance we could pay later? We've got to. No problemo, Jorge shrugged. I'll just add it to your existing debt, which now totals, he paused for dramatic effect, $15,678.92. That much? I've been keeping track since the day you first walked in. The llama incident is included, by the way. Let's roll. Frank headed toward the door. I'm driving. Not a chance. Ramirez blocked him. You've got so much booze in you, your breath could be used as a Molotov cocktail. I'm driving. In my Falcon? Frank clutched the keys to his chest dramatically. That car hates cops more than hippies hate deodorant. Ramirez rolled his eyes. Hand over the keys, Romeo. Or I'll call the precinct and have them bring the new breathalyzer the department bought with war on drugs money. Oh, the Japanese one? Frank winced. The one that beeps like a hungover R2-D2? Exactly. Keys. The Falcon grumbled as Ramirez sat behind the wheel. The V8 engine growled in a tone suspiciously close to profanity. Just don't tell her you're a cop, Frank whispered, stroking the dashboard. She's got trauma from when a squad car scratched her bumper back in '78. On the way to the docks, the old radio sputtered out, Billie Jean, by Michael Jackson, interrupted by static and crackling. So what's the deal with Monica? Ramirez asked, turning onto the waterfront. You didn't fall for that cheap story about a missing brother, did you? Frank pulled out a crushed pack of Marlboros. Of course I did. I'm an idiot. But I'm an idiot with experience. While she told me the sob story, I planted a bug in her purse. You carried bugs with you? After the Russian mob incident? Always. Also a backup revolver. And hangover pills. And a folding umbrella. Umbrella? What the hell for? After the flamingo thing, I don't take chances. The Falcon came to a stop outside a warehouse that looked like it had been designed by a post-apocalypse-obsessed lunatic. Got a plan? Ramirez checked his good old Smith & Wesson. Same as always. Go in, say something Clint Eastwoodish, and hope I don't have to run through a hail of bullets. How often does that work? Not once. But I'm an optimist. Suddenly, a woman's scream echoed from the warehouse. Monica! Frank sprinted toward the building. Stop, you idiot! Ramirez ran after him. We need backup. You got a quarter for the payphone? Frank shouted over his shoulder. Because I spent my last one on the jukebox. They burst in and froze. In the center of the room, under dim hanging lights, stood Monica with a gun aimed at the gang leader, now tied up. Gentlemen, she smiled, adjusting her hair. You're late to the party. What the? Ramirez started. Let me guess, Frank interrupted. You're not just a con artist. Close. She pulled out a shiny badge. DA agent. And this charming gentleman, she nodded at the bound thug, is a key link in the cocaine supply chain through Detroit's Mexican restaurants. And you used me as bait. Frank shook his head. And here I thought this was the beginning of a beautiful romance. Sorry, darling, duty calls. Oh, and your listening device? She smirked. Very cute. Old school. I fed it to some pigeon somewhere between El Coyote and the laundromat on 5th Street. At that moment, spotlights hit the warehouse windows, and the roar of engines announced the cavalry had arrived. And here come my colleagues. Monica chambered around. New DA cartel busting division. Thanks for the help, boys. Especially you, Frank. You were delightful. Frank turned to Ramirez. You know what? I think happy hour at the Pink Floyd just started. The llama story was simpler, huh? Ramirez smirked. Shut up and let's go! You're buying? I spent everything paying off Jorge.